Welcome to this new virtual series, A Walk in the Park with Gil. My name is Gil Peñalosa, in Spanish, Guillermo Peñalosa. I was born in Bogota, Colombia, and lived during my childhood across from a public park. My parents say that actually I lived in the park. Many years later, I served as Bogota's head of parks, sports and recreation. Magnificent opportunity. I led the design and construction of over 200 parks, from Simón Bolívar Park with over 100 hectares to multiple neighborhood ones, mostly in low-income areas. Now I live in Canada, and 15 years ago created 880 Cities, a non-profit organization which focuses on parks, streets, and other public spaces and their uses by people of all ages and backgrounds. I was elected chair of World Urban Parks twice and now serve as its ambassador. Today, we just went through the Olympic Games in Tokyo, Olympic and Paralympic. And always with the Olympic Games or large sports events, people think, okay, what is their legacy? What do we have afterwards? Is billions of dollars into it. And some cities end up with some white elephants that no one uses. Other cities do some magnificent transformations and use the Olympic and Paralympic Games as a trigger. Today, we have Ruth Lynn Wong Holmes, who's gonna do a presentation on the Olympic Park, the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park in East London, and how it has really transformed not only the park itself, but the surroundings. So she's gonna do a presentation with lots of images for about 20 minutes, and then we are gonna have a conversation. If you have any questions or any comments, please write them on the section of questions. The chat is not is disabled, is not habilitated so that you can really focus on Ruth's presentation. But if you want to have any comments, please send it to us through the questions or any questions, and we'll incorporate it after Ruth's presentations. Ruth, thank you very, very much for having accepted to do this webinar. We are all very eager to learn about the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park.
Yeah, so I work for the London Legacy Development Corporation as a landscape architect. That's my training. I've worked for the LLDC for about 4.5 years. And then before that, I did just over 11 years working for the Royal Parks in London. So Hyde Park, St James's Park, places people might hopefully have visited or know about. And prior to that, I worked for a groundwork trust, which was about co-design and working with communities to make their spaces better, often leftover spaces that were underused in their housing estates or in their neighborhoods, and making them places where they might grow food or play or do sports. And then in my early career, I started off working somewhere where we didn't see things built for 12 years. And I just thought that that was very sort of academic, and I didn't like that. So I changed so that I could participate with citizens and community leaders to, just improve our environment.
Wonderful, thank you. So let's get started with the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. When people come together, the citizens, clients, designers, and managers. Thanks, Ruth.
You're welcome. Yeah, so I just chose this title because I think this really encapsulates where I think the magic happens. So when you bring people together, you're able to create sort of amazing things. The Olympic legacy and the Olympic values are about excellence and friendship and respect. And it's a sports culture and education, but about bringing in a better world. That is the spirit of the Olympics, and that's the spirit of the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. And I just want to sort of highlight a few bits about the different parts people play in bringing something as amazing as this, and how we're building the legacy from them games. As you said before, Gil, it was a once in a lifetime opportunity to make a massive change in this area. So we like to bring people together, and I think this is run through the whole design, development, commissioning of the games, just because there's a diversity of thought. When you have different people coming together, you bring different perspectives, you bring lived experience, which can be really, really valuable, particularly people with different abilities. And that was really about the Paralympics as well, really showcasing what people's abilities were. And then there was also time spent learning lessons from other games and developing ideas and proposals and ideas with the local community, as well as people who had experience of others. So that's why local knowledge is brilliant, bringing people together. So they understand the communities we're working in and how to design things which are going to be things people really want, engage with and enjoy. And I think better decisions are made when you bring people together. So you're not avoiding sort of groupthink, as we call it, or people saying, well, we know best. And so that also makes processes much quicker, because decisions can be made swiftly and good decisions made quickly. And then, of course, what I like to say is that it makes where the magic happens, where something unexpected, extraordinary, but completely and utterly brilliant can happen through someone's experience. So this is simple, because that's where my family's from, half my family. And when the UK worked really, really hard on getting the 2012 Games approval, and when we heard of our success, there was a real sort of promise made by the UK government and by all the people who put the bid together to make it as successful as possible, with this really big idea that we would bring people together, we would have transformational change, we would bring inspiration, we would bring innovation, and the big idea of really connecting people, and particularly young people, and then also creating a really lasting legacy using this opportunity. So this is a picture of London, and this is where the decision was made in terms of where to put the park and the regeneration area and the majority of the new build things which would help us host the games. And as you can see, the dark green areas are the places where there are multiple indices of deprivation or poverty. And the idea was to have a park at the heart of this, because it's well known, the research, that often places where there is poverty, there is lack of access to high quality green space. So this set really the vision. So this is an image of the vision in 2009 of how the park would look once it's built out, with new neighborhoods, new venues, new places for people to participate and engage. And my job now is to make sure that we're delivering the London Legacy Development Corporation vision and mission, which is about creating a new metropolitan area of London, which is vibrant and wonderful, and a place where people want to be, want to work, can afford to live, and have access to amazing facilities and green space. The UK context at that time, we had a commission for the built environment, which had a special section that focused on green spaces and green space managers, and really about raising the standard, which was also part of the Green Flag Award. If anyone's heard of that, that's now going international. And that was 15 years old at that time. And so had great experience of bringing people into parks and open spaces and developing those and making sure that they were managed well and invested in. And then institutions like the Landscape Institute were also publishing policy statements to understand the great value of green infrastructure and its proximity to other people. And then the vision was really setting out to change a landscape which was very much industrial, which had lots of kind of heavy industrial uses. It was quite polluted. It was very difficult to get across. The accessibility and the connectivity across this space was poor. And there wasn't much for people to do there. And then the transformation was to create a space that was going to be rich in biodiversity, that people could freely access and have high quality spaces to use, and also was going to host the greatest show on earth, which was the Olympic and Paralympic Games. So this is the site beforehand. So if you like looking at things like this, I love them. The river is the one thing that sort of remains, which is the Lower Lee Valley. And then there's places like the Westfield Shopping Centre, the London Stadium is now here, the Velodrome is there. You can just about see there was another waterway there. And then this is the place where the Athletes Village was placed, where the athletes stayed during games time. So that's the picture of it during games time, with lots of temporary venues and places for sporting events. That's the London Stadium. That's the Velodrome, where lots of the cycling activity happened. That's the media centre, which is now Here East, which is a hub for tech companies, and the Copper Box Arena. And all these other areas were set out to allow volunteers to have their lunch, or for places for people to eat during games time, to meet, to get accreditation, to go through security. And then at the heart was the park, which is a riverside park. And it was really sort of amazing sort of ambition set to create something very different that could have a life beyond the games. And so this is partly through the construction of the landscape, and we'll come back to this area later, which is sort of a lens of landscape with some sort of water attenuation and swales which take the water through. Large reed beds were built here, which were new to the area, and lawn areas for people to enjoy. And I think it was really clear that there was a very, very strong client ambition to make this the most sustainable, the greenest, the most biodiverse games record, and then also talk about accessibility. And you'll see from the accessibility, the paths were really, really wide, and they were also set to a very gentle gradient, as gentle as we could possibly do, because there was about 8 meters difference in height between the highest point and the water's edge. And I think we worked really hard, and the designers worked really hard with everyone pulling together to make sure that there was a sense of an equality of access across the whole site. So if you had a child in a wheelchair, you felt just as much and just as able to get to the water's edge as someone who was able-bodied. And this is the north part of the park, which is very much full and very much designed as a continuation of the biodiversity. Then this is the one I call Flower Power, because the games time was amazing for plants and flowers, which I think people found really unexpected and totally engaged with. You would wander around watching people feeling and touching and taking photographs of the plants that were there during games time. And this is where I really think designers delivered. They worked together, they listened, they collaborated, they inspired one another. When I talked to the designers that were there at the time, working together, the engineers, the landscape architects, the water engineers, the MEP mechanical and electrical guys, were all there, all thinking very closely for the shared vision to make this a sustainable and green place. And also making sure it was engaging, dynamic, and a high quality space at the end of the day. And I think that's what drew people together, this kind of immovable deadline of the games, as well as the kind of complete and utter backing of the client to make sure it worked in a really, really successful way. And so this is when the magic happened. This was when the games was open to people who had tickets, lucky enough to get tickets to see the amazing athletics and other sporting activity. But also just to note that the games also brought the spotlight to other parks. And I was working for the Royal Parks of London at that time. So St James's Park at the heart of government on Whitehall had beach volleyball. Hyde Park and Kensington Gardens had the triathlon. Richmond and Bushy Park had long distance cycling events. And Greenwich Park held horse riding events. So there was a great big horse riding menage in the middle of the park, and the cross-country jumps went across the park. And the amazing thing, again, was sustainability. So some of the jumps for the cross-country horse riding were designed so that they could be incorporated into the playground later. So if you ever go down there, you'll see some amazing little carved sheep that were part of a jump during the Olympic Games. Then for Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, almost as soon as the crowds had disappeared, it was about trying to transform the park into a public park. And that might seem simple at the beginning, but there was lots of stuff with it which was in there during games time, lots of temporary venues, lots of things that needed to be transformed. It had to be free access, open 24 hours, creating a magical space for communities and people to enjoy, both locally, regionally, nationally, and even internationally. And then making sure that we set up a really excellent form of management and maintenance to keep that going and keep that sort of magic alive. So this is just an example of how this sort of happened. So this, amazingly, was the park before anything, work started. This is what everyone called the Fridge Mountain in the local community. We had engagement events where children would walk past this on the way to school, and this was their impression of the area. They drew pictures of this Fridge Mountain. And do you know where that's now? Well, that was where the London Aquatic Centre is. And this is the London Aquatic Centre during construction. During games time. And I think I show you this because it's the most transformational piece between games time and it being a public park and having permanent venues. The London Aquatic Centre, as it is now, is the central piece. And then this had two huge wings on the side of it to allow the thousands of crowds, people to sit as spectators and view the amazing pool and the diving pool. And then now this has been transformed into a local or public pool. So it's not anything fancy. I mean, it's an amazing building, but it's not anything that is priced so that it's very expensive or very inclusive. It is like any other local authority or a local borough pool. The other thing about this picture is noticing that down here, bridges also had to be transformed. They were designed to take thousands of people on one or two, for the 2 weeks of games. And then it really meant that we could transform them back into much narrower bridges across the park. So you'll see this part of the bridge disappeared and the other part of the bridge remained as a permanent feature of the park. So this was all about the designers and others coming together and thinking about how we could make this sustainable and how we could make sure that there was something as a living legacy. So this is the park fairly recently, probably about a year ago, and it shows you the amazing sporting venues that were left behind from the Olympic Games. And it also shows you the amount of construction that's going on with new educational buildings and cultural buildings. So this is the site of University College London that's coming to the park, bringing lots of pause and think. And there was lots of stuff going on. There's been lots of things around Black Lives Matter, legislation within the UK, and then of course a global pandemic, which has changed how we've been thinking about things. But also it's given us an amazing opportunity to have a look at what's been happening with our visitor numbers. We track visitor numbers through our Wi-Fi system. And though it doesn't give us real numbers of how many people are in the park, it at least gives us an idea of how visitors' number change over time. Because not everyone carries a mobile phone, not everyone is connected to the internet through the park, but at least you can see where, when we went into first lockdown in the UK, there was a massive drop. All our venues closed down. People were sort of not allowed to go out except for an hour every day. And so as you see that during this time, there was a huge drop in numbers, but then this slowly climbed back as lockdown eased and we were allowed to go out a little bit more freely. and lots of people then started discovering the park for the first time. We've also been working a lot on our management documents, because we feel as part of Legacy, it's worth writing down what we're doing and making sure we're sharing it. And these are 3 documents that we've done. The first one on green flag judging advice, to have an executive summary that's much more engaging for the public. Our biodiversity action plan is a local authority planning requirement for us, but we have made it much more open and exciting for other people to use the information and engage with. And then we're following best practice in terms of learning the value of the landscape, and thinking about how this iconic place, which was associated with amazing games, an amazing event, as well as really important designers, could be cared for in the future and valued. So going back to sort of the original things of the talk, we like bringing people together. It works incredibly well. We are building a legacy. And to do that, we really love to hear from people about their lived experience and their local knowledge as people are moving towards the park, as the neighbourhoods and all the new homes around the park are opening up. We get to speak to people and really understand how best to manage the park and maintain it to a high quality in the future. And here are some of our park champions. These are people who volunteer on the park, whether it be conservation volunteering or just showing people around or taking people in. We have what we call accessibility buggies, where if you have a mobility impairment, you can be taken on a tour around the park in a little buggy. And though during the pandemic and the lockdowns, these activities had to be restricted, we now have a huge demand of people wanting to get out and getting into the park and volunteer and help us look after it. And some of these things can just be about taking photographs from a space, so we can track things over time and see how our they are, what the demographic is, and what they like when they come to the park, and then make sure that we are supporting that through our invitation and our activities, and also targeting parts of the community that may park, a place where there's music.
Hello, Ruth. I think we lost your voice in the last minute. Okay, now you are back on.
Okay, I've got 1 minute. Cool.
No. You have all the time that you need. I said that you went mute like for about 1 minute.
Oh, did I?
I don't know what. No, but it might be the connection. No worries. Continue.
Brilliant. So just to say that there's also when we did our valuing the park, it was, and now we're sort of reviewing things. We're in this kind of new context of the government looking at creating a green recovery for the UK, focusing on green space and green infrastructure. There's also things about Her Majesty's Treasury has also commissioned a report about the value of parks and how that's important in terms of biodiversity. There's also our 25-year government environment capital account is really interesting because it looks at what the value of the natural environment and how that brings value to local people. And the calculation we have is in terms of just the benefit from recreational use of the park, where where people don't use the National Health Service for medical care, or they use it actively, means that there's about £8.7 million worth of benefit versus the 2.1 million that we spend on park management and keeping this the spaces to the high quality so they are used and engaging. We're also careful. We know that the park was designed to do this. This is a flood event during heavy rainfall. It was always designed to be able to take this water because it could then remove people from houses, 4,000 houses downstream from flood. BBC, London College of Fashion, which will bring a sort of cultural living legacy to the area. And as Sadiq Khan, our mayor, says, it's a sense of levelling up London. So you're bringing things to East London that West London has enjoyed for many, many years. We listen to our citizens as well. There is a concern about climate change. This shows an event earlier on this year in exactly the place I've just shown you, where the cultural buildings are coming. And the image here shows some of the predictions if there is a 1.5 increase in global warming, that the sea levels would rise to the areas in pink. And the yellow outline says where the park is and where we are. So there is concern. But I wanted to quickly talk about something really positive, less gloom and doom. There's we've just installed an amazing new area in the park called the London Blossom Garden. It was about talking to citizens and engaging them in the process of design. We had a really strong client group again, where we brought people together who had a very strong vision for sustainability, greenness and inclusion. We had landscape architects who were expert in co-design, co-creation, and we had our park managers who could give us the most incredible insight into how the space managed and worked. And this was during the most amazing, most incredible pandemic during lockdown. And we had to rethink and think of things quite quickly and innovatively, how we could deal with rapid production of a project. And the park managers were had progressed and changed during this time. Our community engagement consultants were really, really keen in terms of trying to make sure we engage with local to key workers who are our National Health Service workers and local people, to ask them about how they wanted the space to be. It was supposed to be it is a space that commemorates those who were affected by COVID-19, people who lost lives, people whose lives were deeply affected. And here are some of the quotes that came out of that community engagement. And the designers really responded to this community input. They understood that it was supposed to be a space that you wanted to decompress, to reflect, to recover from suffering, a space to heal. And that it wasn't overly designed. They didn't want something flashy, overly designed or opulent. They wanted something peaceful and tranquil that they could enjoy with their families and loved ones. And then this was one of my magical moments that I just wanted to finish with, Gil. It's just so lovely. This is what I went on to park a few months after the project had been installed. And I met these amazing women. They work for the National Health Service. They'd heard about it in the local press. They came down to see the place. They were enjoying our sofa-like benches, which had been specifically designed to be very inclusive, with armrests, backrests, and spaces where you could sit next to somebody if you were in a wheelchair. And we're really looking forward to do some more work down here. We want to do a community planting day where we can encourage schools and people of all ages to be to make their mark in the space, and really sort of to reflect on the amazing things that came out of our consultation. There were really, really moving moments where people were telling us really harrowing stories about how they were coping with COVID-19. And I just think the result now, this change in the park, is really amazing testament to them. And I think it was really a moment where clients, citizens, designers, and the park management all came together to create something really special, and hopefully some magical moments like this for people who enjoy the park.
Thank you, Ruth. It has been amazing, very, very interesting. A large sports event has served as a trigger to transform a park, to create a magnificent park, as well as to transform an area which included sustainable mobility, housing, and many other features for people of all ages and all abilities. It's very impressive what you have done, and I hope that everyone who has been present will have enjoyed it. We thank you very, very much, and we hope to see everyone in 2 weeks. Thanks, Ruth.
Thank you so much.